All the guys that I either personally know or have been in military that have just rubbed shoulders with, or I've heard on podcasts and things like that, they all talk about how ignorantly naive the average American is to how real and geographically close major threats are. And we're just living in this little la-la land, and it's because they're doing such a good job that we get to be in this la-la land. But
I think like the TSA is like a good example. After like 9/11 in 2001, you had all this TSA stuff, but we know the studies that say it actually doesn't do anything for you. If anything, like it frustrates people like me who are like, I know this doesn't do anything, because they always get like, they do tests and they always get bombs and weapons through the airport security and stuff. But they put that in place, like I think it's called security theater. Like they make you feel safe, but in reality, like the military, as bad as like some people look at the CIA and the NSA and stuff like that, they are anticipating and doing a lot to like preempt bad things from happening. Mm-hmm. No,
indeed.
But I think like a good example of the phishing thing that you were talking about, besides like getting a email from somebody who says, I'm a Nigerian prince or whatever it is. Like,
yes. That stereotypical example.
If anybody emails you from Africa asking for money or saying they're have money to give you, it's a scam. It's a lie. Just don't respond. It shouldn't even be in your inbox at this point. But if it makes it there, mark it as spam, and it'll get out of there, and Google will like acknowledge that. But like back in the day, I think it was a Motorola. It was the company. There was this guy, and he was tired of paying for cell phone service. I don't remember when this was, the 80s, 90s, somewhere in that range. It was early on. And he found out the name of somebody at one of Motorola's factories. And so he called up to another place, a secretary basically, and said, hey, I'm this guy from this place. I need these engineering specs. Can you like send them over here? And she did and stuff. He ended up going to prison because like he was impersonating somebody else. But like, it's simple things like that they say like half the time that somebody breaks into something is just like they find common knowledge and then they use it to like either pretend to be somebody else. And so he was able to like modify his phone and like not pay for cell service and not be tracked and stuff like that.
That's
and then
cool.
They found a way to get him and they put him in prison and stuff, but didn't work out for him.
There's a thing called intrusion detection that is used to keep out digital threats like that. And then there's a thing called penetration testing, which is mostly just for digital things, but you can pay somebody to physically go to your business or whatever it is. Again, most of my expertise is more on the business side, but it sort of applies to personal life too. You can have them, get some painting overalls on and go and they'd be like, hey Molly, how's it going? The coworker, and be like, I'm going over here to paint, or what they learn the the receptionist's name or whatever, and the point is to see how far in the building they can go before they're caught, and then that's your test. You passed because you caught them in the first 30 seconds before they went 20 feet, and you failed because they were in the IT closet for 4 hours. What did they do in there? All that kind of stuff. So that's a very common thing that folks will do. Here's another topic that is a total podcast: compliance. People probably have heard of, you've probably seen HIPAA, HIPAA.
Yeah.
That is a medical industry acronym that I do not remember the
Hippocratic oath. I don't know. I actually don't know what
it's an acronym for something.
It's something.
Basically, it means that data is somewhat secure. But the point there is various industries have regulations where they are fined penalties, monetary penalties and things like that if they don't abide by them. That's, I was saying in the beginning, there's, the doctor that'll send you the letter that's just the canned letter from their office saying, here's how we're protecting your data. They have to send that because that is one of the regulations of HIPAA compliance. Anyway, all that to say that there's a lot of things that those folks have to do to kind of keep things under wraps, and it helps.
Whether or not they actually do. No, just kidding.
Right.
That's a whole nother.
Yes. And
yeah,
all the where I was going with that was the penetration testing and the intrusion detection, all that kind of stuff that you can use for your business, help you to check the box of we are compliant, which I was going to mention earlier. This was something I was going to mention, that what's happening nowadays is I mentioned firewall. That sounds like a awesome magical thing, but it's literally just a machine that we were talking about. The internet is this bit of connections between devices. A firewall is one of those devices that basically is we'll call it a traffic cop. It tells people, okay, you stop, all right, you go, you do. It's more of allow any traffic from these places and not from these other places. They were a thing that's been around for a bit, not very involved. And what people have now is ones that are a little bit more intelligent and reactive to what is happening.
They look for like large amounts of unusual traffic, like in the case of a DDoS attack or something like that. I don't know how much actual firewalls take part in that. I know there's certain other protocols in there, like CDNs and things like that. But I know most people have them to some degree, like on their computers or on their home network or something like that.
Yeah, very basic. And DDoS, which denial of service something or denial of something service is what DDoS stands for.
DDoS, denial.
But
I know it's denial of service. Like when you basically, like if you hear this so there's a bunch of like hacker news that you see in the news, and IT or tech people are always like cringy when people are like, they hacked the CIA. And I think XKCD put out like a good comic strip about this. Like anytime like people see on the news, they hacked the CIA, what a web developer sees is somebody pulled down a poster by the CIA. It's like, that's all they really did. Like most of the time they're not actually getting into CIA, like actual stuff. They're just taking down a website and stuff. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, to common people it is like, oh, I can't get on Amazon and buy my whatever else. Like they're freaking out. But like to us, it's like, oh, they just took down something. But like going back to like security as an individual, so something that's really related to me right now, going onto YouTube and stuff, there's all these stories about people's accounts getting taken over by very simple things that we don't understand. Somebody will comment on like your YouTube channel and say, hey, want to be friends, or nice videos, or like low engagement comments is what I call them, where they're not actually engaging with your content. They're just leaving a comment. And if you interact with that comment, somehow by interacting with it, they take over your YouTube channel and then they like rebrand it. And this is like a big problem for people who are small channels who don't have a direct connection with YouTube, and but they have enough. They're monetized. They have enough subscribers and stuff to be monetized. So they're good target of these scams because, oh, hey, if we take this channel, rebrand it, we can sell it on our site or whatever like that is. And these people, usually small channels, can't do anything about it. So something that I don't really know how they're doing this as far as
if they're coming through the networking side. Like if they see like, oh, it came from this, I'll use the term, the IP address, and then they can see what, I don't know, passwords you're putting in there. I don't know. I know
some like two-factor authentication is like a big thing. Like, oh, type in your phone number here, and anytime you log into this website, we'll text you a special code and to make sure it's you, and then you enter in the website. And that's one step in the right direction. But did you know, and I just don't want to like, safety is an illusion out there for everybody. Well, like you can spoof, and you've probably gotten text messages from people. Like if you find out later, like, I'm trying to explain it. Like you'll get spam messages from a phone number or a phone call from like India, but it's under a US phone number. They're basically pretending to be that phone number. So they can do the same thing on the telecom network, from what I understand, with YouTube or two-factor authentication. They can pretend to be your phone for a short time and then get the code and enter it in and go into the site. So that's not even the best security. What I read recently, I should really like get a sponsorship from these people, because like YubiKey is like a little key. It's a physical device that you have to log in. And from what I understand, you have to have like your finger on it, and it's a bit of, if I understand, there's some of them that's like biometric, but it's also like, it's just what's that device, and you have to have that device, and you can use it to like protect your YouTube account or other accounts online, like Google accounts. So if you have a Google account and you have special data, that like people's personal information that you really shouldn't be keeping on Google Drive, but you have it there anyways, you can use one of these devices to make it so that nobody without that key, like nobody can actually log into that account without that key. Again, someday some hacker is probably going to find some way to get into your account without having that key. It's just inevitable. They figure it out. But some of that is, I don't know, it's amazing to see that we have to come to that point to have something like that, which means we're probably moving more towards like biometric technology that we'll rely on.
Yeah, and in the business side of things, you see some people that there's a big push, like everything in the cloud, which meant that you had less stuff that was local to your office or your
like
business.
the Google Chromebooks.
Right. So a lot of people seem to be kind of pulling back a little bit, doing more of a hybrid thing where they have a little bit of stuff that's your old school, local hardware that you can actually go and touch and see the blinking lights. It's plugged into the wall, that kind of thing. And then a little bit of the stuff that's online. Businesses are also changing a lot, but that tends to be a little bit of what we're seeing as far as trends.
Yeah. I mean, like you have a lot of factors in there. Like you have security, you have the amount of data that we have nowadays. Because I mean, if you have a camera, you're probably taking pictures. And if you have a spouse or significant other who's on Instagram, they're probably taking lots of pictures. And that amounts to some amount. Like obviously there's got to be a good amount of people paying for iCloud or whatever. But I'm not really into paying for data storage. I have network attached storage, so I back up my stuff. Like I have it on my computer, I back it up on my second, like my MacBook. So I have a laptop, and then I also try to back up to my network attached storage, and then I also put some on Google. But then you have to worry about like, oh, Google only gives you like 10 to 15 gigabytes right now, and then they introduced the thing that if you don't use your account for 2 years, we're gonna delete it. And then also, if you are over the limit that you're allowed to have for free, we're gonna delete your account after like 2 years or whatever. And I was like, whoa. That goes into effect next year. So it won't be until 2023 before they start deleting accounts. But I was like, they must be kind of tired of storing everybody's cat and dog pictures from the 90s.
Yeah, I imagine that means they're a lot. Hopefully they'll give you a nice warning before they just nuke the thing.
Well, I understand. Yeah, I got tons of it. So I have like, I don't know how many emails you have or most people have, but like I have like 50 something Google emails for all kinds of like little various businesses I run, personal use, data storage and backup things. Rather than like go and pay for like one Google account to have all, I like made several with similar names and like backed up a bunch of stuff there because it's like cold storage to me. Like they'll keep it safe since they're doing the service for free, which is obviously not the intention of what they're hoping to do, but but it'll be interesting to see where some of these security things and data storage goes in the future. What do you think, like your company in particular, and like how is that going to play out? Because we're seeing new like phishing scams, security problems, but then also like just data like growing to, I think you were talking about the other day, like with S3 objects and stuff, like keeping multiple backups of a single thing. That must be kind of a pain in the neck for like, does your company do that?
Yes, we do have that. That's a piece of technology that essentially, if you've ever noticed, Facebook doesn't randomly lose your pictures and doesn't randomly lose your posts. The reason is that they have multiple copies of your stuff spread out around so that if one of those copies dies, they can just pull one of the other ones and give it to you. It's all secure, in as much as anything is secure, but it's essentially, instead of literally having your eggs in one basket, you have your eggs spread in multiple baskets.
The same eggs in multiple baskets.
Yes, the exact same eggs in multiple baskets. So it's you can look at it on Google, object storage. But yeah, it's. I guess I'll leave it at that. But I guess what was your question? I kind of trailed off for a second.
How does that like go? Where I was going, the amount of data that your company has to handle. Like, do you have to limit people more, or like constantly be building new infrastructure because you're having to create multiple places to store multiple copies of everything constantly?
We have the luxury of not being the big whale or big fish in the pond. So what that means is we're a little bit closer to the ear on the ground of what our customers are going to be doing. Sometimes not though, but we literally have to go buy more. It's just called infrastructure. It's those physical pieces of gear that you see in the movies and plug them into the data center. But we have a business model where you just pay for your space. If you need to add more space, you just order more. So we kind of know ahead of time, like, oh, okay, they're going to double their space next month. So we just need to prepare for it. Other companies, probably what the big giant in the industry is Amazon, not the Amazon that you buy your stuff from, but Amazon Web Services, AWS. They are essentially kind of a mixture of a lot of websites, and now it's used for a lot more things besides websites. But a lot of the internet is owned by or maintained by, whichever phrase you like better, the Amazon Web Services. Anyway, all that to say that they have thousands and thousands of sites and employees and millions of different pieces of hardware that all interact together, and at their scale they have a little bit more wiggle room, I suppose you'd say. What we do as far as just the scale of data, we're sort of in a good place where we don't, just because of security reasons, we don't ever look at people's stuff. We're not allowed to. If you did, you get fired. So
it's a good policy to have.
It is, and our business model is more, we make sure everything keeps running and you do whatever you need to do with your stuff. And it's sort of a separation that way from the business philosophy standpoint too. So it makes it nice that we don't have to really mess around with it. And it's something they can just, as long as they have space, they can use stuff. And if they run into the wall and don't have any more space, and they just order more space and good to go.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like, do you think there's anything that's going to be changing the way that you guys store stuff? Because like obviously like you work here locally, but I'm guessing most of your like data isn't actually like stored here locally. I mean, that doesn't make sense. But are you seeing like any changes with how you handle security, or that like, oh, hey, we have to anticipate this is going to, like, throw out a big word out there like quantum computing or something like that? Like obviously direct relation isn't like, it is not there, but like, do you see things on the horizon like, oh, hey, we're going to have to like anticipate this someday?
Let's see, I guess I'll frame this from the security standpoint, because that is a really big concern for a lot of folks. There are, I was talking about the trend of everything goes in the cloud. Now we're kind of doing this hybrid thing. Another thing is it's called SaaS, or software as a service. It essentially is just your software that you use for your business is not literally located in your building. It's now online somewhere. And I'll use a common one. A lot of people use Salesforce as a what do they call it? Customer CRM. It's customer relations manager.
Yeah, and they actually just picked up Slack, from what I remember.
Yes, Slack is a very popular thing. A lot of people this year are using Zoom or WebEx, or you use FaceTime on your phone. All of those things, maybe with FaceTime is a little different because that's owned by Apple and kind of has been all along, from my understanding anyway. All of those things, we'll use Zoom as an example, are just a software. You could have it locally installed and just used inside your building, but now it can be used anywhere, and you just use the software that is downloaded from their website and you're good to go. And you just use your phone, your computer, your iPad, whatever. You can go home, work there. You can work in a coffee shop. I guess most of us are doing home this year.
Yeah.
That is because there's so much of that going on. It's not like, well, we'll use an example of let's say there's a company that has 10,000 people. It's not like every person of those 10,000 is doing the exact same thing. If you and I were on a team with, like, I don't know, let's say we had 6 people, we'd be like, oh, there's a piece of software that we should use that. And so the 6 of us with our budget for our department of 6 people are using this thing. And so now our company's data is kind of growing out into this other area with whatever that piece of software is.
Yeah, like the creative market decided, hey, we like to store our files on Dropbox. And, well, the company doesn't actually do that. And that's kind of a security risk.
Yes. So framing this back to the security and the IT manager standpoint, they are just scrambling, trying to figure out, like, okay, where is everything going? Because you'll have all these departments that are just going in various directions, using different things. And then we have good old human nature, which is we don't want to change things. We're lazy. And so there's some of that where there are some, bad security practices. Like you just save things on your computer and then take it home instead of saving it in the company's secure drive, or whatever the example would be. So they constantly have to keep track of where everybody's putting things. This relates to your personal life too. You be careful where you save things, what you're saving.
Well, everybody has like single sign-on nowadays with like Google or Facebook, and like you go to some website to use, like, oh, this is a picture editor, or like Shutterfly or whatever it might be, and like sign on with this social media platform, and now you're giving that website access to a bunch of information, and you're just like, oh, it was just easy to do that. But then that's a vulnerability there, because like, when are you going to go down the road and say, oh, I don't use that anymore, and just like uncheck the box or delete it and like make sure it can actually, like, who actually does that nowadays?
Yes, they say things can either work or they can either be secure. One of those two things.
Yes.
And it's a real thing. Either it's completely locked down and safe, relatively speaking, of course, or it actually works and it's convenient.
Yeah, you have to have like some level of like safety, but you also like need some level of convenience, because like you could write down your password, like a 26 mixed up character password that you keep in a lockbox buried in your backyard, and another like and a UB key, and then also like your thumbprint, but you always wear gloves and your thumbprint is only like buried in another part of your yard, and you could like do this crazy practice, which when I'm thinking through it, it's like, well, if your information is on the internet, it's still in another place, so it's like really not that safe anyways. But
sounds like a premise for an interesting movie almost.
Yeah. Some delusional guy who like hides all of his like fingers in a box in his backyard or something.
Yeah, burns off the fingertip or the fingerprints and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then you could have like one, which I guess he'd be like the ultimate bank robber or something, like
something.
Cat burglar.
Yeah, back to what you're talking about of the where are we going, quote unquote, with security and storage and data and all this stuff and the internet. Obviously, we don't know, but in general, it's the same thing as anything else with our culture, where we all want convenience. We're the McDonald's drive-through culture, and that does not mean it's more secure. That means it's more convenient. So the challenge is either for you as a person in business or your person as an individual with your own personal things, is to just be smart about how you interact with whatever it is that you're interacting with, whether it's a website, something with logins, telling people things, all of that kind of stuff. It just be really smart, be careful. We're fortunate that we have, I'll use the credit card fraud example. We're fortunate that most credit card companies, because they want to keep your business, they'll usually, this guy in Denmark bought, 5 cars using my credit card last night. Like they'll usually forgive that kind of stuff because it's pretty obvious. But and instead of holding you responsible for that money, but there are a lot of, I don't know, the one concern I have is you see in the news, like, we both live in South Carolina, the South Carolina tax folks or some group of the government got hacked and a lot of people's tax records. I want to say this was 5 to 10 years ago now, probably more like 5 to 8, maybe something like that. But all I have to say is what you didn't hear was, and here's what happened with that information. So that's the part that I'm wondering about. Because what you see now in the we're talking about the bad guys earlier. What they used to do is just blast in, take things down, machine guns blazing. You knew they were there, but now we were talking about phishing. Somebody will accidentally send a password somewhere unknowingly, and now they'll just kind of sit there and just kind of watch things, and a few months just collect data or tweak things in there, and just kind of monitoring, slowly getting their footprint in there. And then if the goal is to remove access and shut things down or delete data or whatever the case is, they are much more capable of devastating things that way.
Yeah. Like, I think that's why it's like important for, like, if you're working from a financial standpoint, people have like LifeLock or things like that, right, where you can like lock down your financial aspects and you have like basically another team. Well, I've read mixed reviews. There are like mixed reviews on any of these services, whether or not they're actually like watching your stuff to make sure like, hey, something unusual happened and protect you. I don't know of like any actual service that does that with like your logins and your like digital life. I'm not sure if
they're starting to do that, but it's with high profile targets, like the CEO of big companies, because
that's expensive to like do something like that.
Like if you were in a cab, again, this is a bad 2020 example, but we'll just use it because it works. If you're the CEO of a massive company that's being publicly traded on Wall Street and everybody's drooling over your company, if you're the CEO, if you happen to leave your phone in a cab and somebody else picks it up, that is worth a lot of money on the black market.
Yeah.
And this isn't even getting into criminal things where maybe you're kidnapped and held for ransom, like in a movie. We're just talking normal stuff. Or
do bad guys still do that? That sounds like so. If I was like
the ransom thing,
yeah, like that sounds like so much work compared to doing anything digitally nowadays.
Right. Yep. And so that's why it's easier to, if you happen to get lucky with getting a device, and then you're golden. What generally will happen is the folks in management are the most lazy and don't want to deal with the inconvenience compared to what they will enforce for their staff, and so you'll have like a special laptop that's just for you, that's twice as powerful or twice as much storage, just because you need to run a company. You can't be sitting there getting tripped up by the limitations that the rest of your staff doesn't actually run into that you do. Anyway, but along with that will come stuff like, oh, I just want to be able to do this, and I don't have to worry about logging out every night or whatever the case is. So the CEOs of the world are prime targets, and they're starting to offer services where you can have yourself not be monitored. That sounds very anti-freedom and all this, but essentially it's a thing that's designed to help kind of be a little bit of a shield around your digital footprint and your life a little bit, because of the fact that you're also a little bit of a target.
Yeah, I think like YouTube does that, the same thing. Like I'd mentioned, like small YouTubers have a harder time retrieving their account. Like most of them, like it's just gone to the wind. But if you're like a bigger one, there's it's alluded to, and some people know this and like they talk about it, but there's like a special thing like, oh, we know this YouTuber because they're really big, and so like nobody's taking their stuff. Like that just doesn't happen because they're like Twitter, for example, with Donald Trump. Tons of people's Twitter accounts get hacked every day. Why doesn't Donald Trump's Twitter get hacked?
It's good transition into, we're getting way into the weeds here, but there's a thing called ransomware, which you hear about in the news, where they lock your stuff and they say, if you want it back, you got to pay me whatever dollars.
I think last year that was like was it last year that was a huge thing? Tons of companies had that happen.
Yep. I don't know the numbers for last year, but in general, there are a lot of really small businesses that are hit with that because A, you're not expecting yourself to be a target, and B, you don't have the funds to be able to pay for really expensive things. And C, maybe your stuff is way outdated as far as the security end of things goes. Anyway, that's
if you're using Windows 95, you should probably update. It's a little old there. I think like everything you were talking about, like with the business and where you are as far as security, it's important, like you were saying, software as a service. And like, if you're going to be a good employee, don't let your department say, hey, we like to use like this other software that our company isn't using, because there's probably somebody in IT that's going to like lose their mind if they find out like you're just exposing us to other vulnerabilities. Because I think we've had this several times with clients. I don't remember like the names or anything like that, but more just for an example, one of them was like keeping people's personal data on Dropbox, I think was one. Another case was just like there were tons of individuals attached like to the Dropbox account, different company and stuff, and some of those individuals no longer work there. And whether or not like any of those individuals, I think they had found out like most of those individuals actually hadn't like went back and like looked at the Dropbox. But like say you fired somebody and your company, some individuals, a team in your company decided, hey, we want to use like Dropbox or something that our company isn't actually using. And then one of those gets fired, but the ID department doesn't know that like your department's using a side thing and doesn't know how to like revoke their access. Suddenly that person might be mad and they might come back and retaliate and do something like that they shouldn't be doing. So like little things like that, I don't think people think they're like, oh, well, it's just more convenient to do this. It's like, well, you're taking a big risk there.
Yes, be intentional with what you do is the moral of the story.
Exactly.
There's something you mentioned I was going to talk about, but I don't remember what it was, so it must not have been intelligent or important. But
well, do you have like any other things that like you want to just like say before we?
We skimmed over something that I usually talk about with this, where this all will come from, because I'm not an expert at any of this, despite what I may sound like, using terms or various things. But usually it comes up with, hey, what do you do for work, Luke? And then the eyes glaze over as I begin to describe things. But anyway, so the internet is not this magical place. The cloud is also not this magical place. It's not all equal. I'm sure any of you who have worked with a car mechanic have experienced. There's some that are really, really good, very honest, very ethical businesses. They know what they do. They are very good at being personable and kind of helping you understand what they're doing if you're not a car person. They don't like rip you off is essentially the point. There are others that do, and they may be so good at it that you don't know about it because they rip you off so well. Same concept applies with the cloud. You were using the example of Dropbox. That's an example that has been in the news as what we would classify as not as like a business grade product. It's more of a consumer grade product, but a lot of businesses have used it. And
well, it's ubiquitous, and the more like well-known something is, the more targeted it is by hackers anyways. But
right. So there's a lot of things that folks are using, a lot of things people are doing that's just not as high quality. So again, my focus is more on the business end. If you think you're not paying your IT folks enough, or if you think you're not paying enough, that's probably true. You can get ripped off on that end too. But in general, the higher quality stuff that you pay more for is going to reap a lot of benefits, and vice versa. But yeah, the internet is this interesting thing that has grown from, I believe, a military project. Is that where it started?
I think a DARPA thing, something in Germany. There were several different pieces of it that really culminated in 94. And at that point, it's been like full speed ahead and just like, forget it. Like, we're going.
Yes. And the internet is a tool like anything else. So you can let it consume you, or you can use it to your advantage, either personally or in your business. So it's very much a Wild West still.
Oh, yes.
But we talked about all the crazy stuff with security and the various trends of, businesses moving to using, different departments will use their own stuff, and they may not be very good at talking to each other and coordinating. Like, it's very Wild West still. And I'm not sure if having a worldwide regulation and control of it would be a necessarily good improvement. But despite the fact that there's a lot of benefits from having everything be on the same page or whatever, it is what it is. It's just this internet of a lot of different things all meshed together.
It's kind of nice, like it's like humans. It's just messy and it works.
Yes.
To some degree.
Yes, the internet is actually, in a philosophical sense, really just a reflection of who we humans are. And that's partially a good thing. And other parts of the internet will show you it's not so great.
Not so great. So. Well, there's been a fun talk. Like, we should definitely, we have obviously, there are tons of tangents to this talk that we could sit down and have a conversation again another time. Right. And you're welcome to, hey, I want to, talk about this, and that'd be fun. And definitely anytime. And of course, if you're watching or listening, I appreciate, subscribing and likes and sharing the podcast or the YouTube channel with your friends. But also, if you have a piece of the conversation that you want to add, or I'm sure if Luke shares this with his coworkers, they're probably very techie people, and they probably are well, you didn't get this right.
I'd get shredded.
Oh, well, just share it with them. And right now I'm calling to you guys, those ones who are you didn't get this right. Tell us, put it in the comments, and we want to have a conversation, because that's what I'm trying to do with this channel is promote dialogue. So yeah, we may not understand all the things when you start your TC, IPC, or all the complicated stuff. But maybe this can be an educational tool. We can figure out a way to put out content that other people can help them understand the internet and help us get better at it. I mean, if your job is to sell and make sure people's data is secured, obviously you want to understand it better. And I'm sure you'd appreciate if your coworkers without beating you over the head that I'm smarter than you are, as I know I've done that in cases, and it's very common in IT people. But if we can have a conversation, correct us, we'll be gracious about it, and we'll put updates, and we'll have more conversations. And of course, if you're one of the persons in our field and you're well, I'd really like to talk about this other tangent that you guys didn't talk about, I'm happy to have you on the show. That's great. Anybody's welcome here. Just want to have good dialogue. So, well, thanks again for coming on the show. So, yeah. And of course, we'll see you guys next week on the Chattervast Podcast.